My name's Tom Martin, and I'm really delighted to be here just sharing some of my mistakes that I've made over the years with an idea that we can perhaps all learn together. And one of the things I love about Groundswell, and actually I love about the regenerative farming community and farming in general, is actually people are incredibly open. We're pretty good at sharing our mistakes, what we got wrong and what we learned from them, and I think that's so important. And farming is actually the fourth industry I've worked in, and of all the industries I've worked in, farming is the most open. And I think we can see that on the various different seminars and stands today, so that's a really, really exciting thing. Now, I have to admit, I haven't got a fold-back screen, so I'm going to have to keep kind of popping out here and working out what's going on the screens. Gosh, that's very difficult. But what I want to do, I just want to start off with a few quotes. And actually, the quote that you can see there really says that if we blame somebody else, we're actually giving up control. Whereas if we accept blame for things that go wrong ourselves, then we maintain the control, and that means we can resolve those things. So it's really important that actually if we make a mistake, we own that mistake, we hold that mistake, we learn from that mistake, and we move on from that mistake. So that's what we're aiming to do today. I'm going to walk out over here. I hope I've got a little bit of space. I might come and sit next to you in a moment, because there really are no foldback screens at all. This could be the most original presentation you've had so far, but let's see how we get on. Are you guys up for just going along with me and seeing how we get on? Okay, this could be the first mistake. Has anyone here not made a mistake, by the way? There are a couple. I think they've had 4 pints over there, but I think you'll find that actually most of us have made mistakes. In fact, I think we've all made mistakes, and it's really important that we can own up to those, and we can own them. And I'm certainly guilty of making mistakes, so I'm going to have to do that. There we go. A little bit about myself. We have a mixed family farm. We're about there. We farm on relatively heavy clay. Everyone who farms clay thinks they've got the heaviest clay farm. We actually have. But that's all you need to know about us. And if you look to the east, with lovely peaty land, and to the west, there's lovely light free draining soil. And we're okay when it's bone dry. Well, quite a bit at the moment, but normally 1 year in 10. And I want to just start with a little quote from an English guy who I heard speaking when I was in Louisville, Kentucky, this January just gone at the National No-Till Conference. A chap called Phil Needham, and he said, if you're not making mistakes, you're not making progress. And I think that's absolutely right. A lot of us are here today to try new things, to discover, to invest in kind of, pushing forward our businesses a little bit. And I think, if you're not making mistakes, you're not making progress. But we want to make progress, and we accept that mistakes are part of the way as we go along here. But I went to that conference as a slightly cocky, certainly very excited and confident Englishman. I was the only one among 600 farmers, and I'd seen my Groundswell T-shirt, and what did we get? What did we get last year? We got a tea towel, didn't we? And I knew about the 5 pillars of regenerative farming because I'd made mistakes in quite a few of those. And I heard a great talk from this guy, not this guy, another guy. This guy. Oh yeah, that's great, thank you. So there are 6 pillars of regenerative farming, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through them today. I'm going to share with you some of the mistakes I've made, and hopefully we'll explore some of the learnings from that as well. As we go through, though, if you see this guy with the green T-shirt with his hand up, that means it's my mistake. That's me putting my hand up. But I've also invited some other friends to be part of this as well. So if you see somebody else's either Twitter heading or social media, that means that they've submitted one of their mistakes, and they wanted to share that with us as well. It's definitely okay, by the way. Just to it generally normally isn't that okay, but today it's okay to laugh at some mistakes. But the most important thing, I've missed that one. The most important thing is that we learn from this bit as well. So there'll be a little bit of commentary on each slide about what we've learned. Really, that's the important thing. It's fine to look at various different things, look at what things have gone wrong, but if we don't learn from those mistakes, then really this event isn't worth the entry fee. So what I'm aiming to do today is to share with you some of my mistakes, really to discover what I've learned. Then we will discuss with your wife. Just have a look around you. How wise does your neighbour look? If you want to move, now's the time to move. We'll have a little discussion with our wise neighbours. They don't sound very confident over there, but you sound pretty confident over here. You've obviously got some wise neighbours there. Then actually think, how can I apply this on my farm? And we're going to enjoy ourselves. And then we're going to go to the bar. And as Richard Heddy always says, cheers. So that'll be the time when we get to the end of this talk. But we'll have a couple of moments just to reflect on what we're going through as we go through it. But what you really want to know is, what's Rick Clark's 6th pillar of Regen Ag? Because we all know those 5 that we've got on our tea towels. And his 6th pillar is context. And I thought, gosh, I don't think that's as good as the other ones. I think that's probably a poor pillar. I think you've just added that in. But actually, the more I think about context, the more I realise it's really valuable. So we just start by looking at some of the errors that I've made based on context. And really, I suppose I would summarise that by saying that copy-paste farming absolutely does not work. If it works even on my neighbour's farm, it may well not work on my farm. And if it works in one field, it may not work in another field. Martin, do you want to just play this video? This is young me, young naive me from about 3 or 4 years ago. We'll just have a listen to my... Oh, hang on, here we go. Oh, poor old Martin. He's got to come around here and now press the button over there as well. So we're going to listen to my young and slightly more naive self. Hi folks, it's Farmer Tom here, and I'm just out for a walk with Mrs. Farmer Tom and the dog on a beautiful spring-like evening. And I picked up a little chunk of soil, and this is what I'm trying to work with. This is actually a little chunk of our heavy clay soil, and I'm not that strong, but I can't actually break that apart at all. I can see a little bit of straw in it, so it should have some weakness there, but that is what I'm working with, and we are trying to really make our soils healthier, more full of life, and more able to produce the food that you guys eat. But this is the starting point, and it's probably the result of a few years of ploughing and misuse and misadventure. But we're trying to do all we can to bring it back into full operation. We've had a cover crop here. That's a mixed crop that we've then grazed off with some sheep to bring plenty of manure back into the soil, so there's plenty of life down there. But we're on 70 feet of clay, our farm is, so that's our starting point. You could make a vase or a plate or a bowl out of that. That is the kind of clay we are working with. So wherever you are, I hope your soils are looking better than this. Bye for now. So young me had done all the right things. We put a cover crop in, brought some sheep in, and our soils still look like that. I mean, we'd actually made all the classic mistakes. They say don't buy a new no-till drill and go regenerative. And we tried to do all those things, but I was just doing things out of context. I was seeing people that I look up to and admire who were having a great time in Regen Ag, and I was trying to do exactly the same thing, but I wasn't quite getting it right because I wasn't quite getting that 6th pillar of context. But it's that copy-paste that I learned. And as I look back, actually, even just preparing for this, I realised there's so many times that I've tried copy-paste farming, and sure enough, it hasn't worked each time. In fact, one of the things I took from that was that we need to work on our drainage, and we'll talk a bit more about drainage a little bit later on. And so we've got a little bit of land, a little bit of fenced skirt land. There's the top of the old riverbank and the peaty bit at the bottom. So I took the mould drainer through it. On the top right, you can see our combine map, and there was a section of probably about 3 hectares that is still causing me headaches today. But it was a lake for a long time, and of course I'd done the right thing. I'd thought about my drainage. I'd drained all that water in, and as you look on the left there, that's what it looks like from the road. You can see, you can see why they call it Tom's Nature Reserve and why it was such a magnet in East England for all kinds of wonderful wildlife. It's fantastic. I'm happy to show you here at Groundswell about that, because that's rewilding something. But that was copy and paste farming. And here's a little video. I don't know if I can press that to make it play. I don't know if I work with my dad, and he sends me. We basically communicate by sending each other pictures of drainage. Look at that. Whoa. I don't know what Neil Parrish was looking for, but I think it was probably this. That is just beautiful. I actually feel so emotional. It's great. But let's go back to our 5 pillars, shall we? The ones we were kind of comfortable with before some bloke from America told us there were 6. And number 1 was reduce tillage. And we'll start off with David Lord, and his takeaway was that drainage, and we've touched on this a little bit before, drainage and soil conditions are so important. And I've been to several farming events recently, and really drainage is just the very basis of what we're doing. As we're starting to make changes, we've got to keep thinking about our drainage, in particular if we're on those soil types where drainage can really show us up as being pedestrian farmers if if we don't do the right thing. A great one from Tom Dures, he's a fantastic farmer, but he said drainage was never really a problem when we were ploughing. And there's a little hint of emotion in the voice there when we say that, and absolutely that's the case. We see some fields like that as we're trying to transition through to regenerative farming. We can get it wrong if we don't really pay attention to the drainage. And again, it's very difficult because of course we're talking about context. So we're trying to get things right, but we do make mistakes because we're just trying some different things, and we eventually then work out what works in our farm as well. Martin Lyons, who's a fantastic advocate for farming and is happy to share his mistakes, had a very similar thing. There's what have we got? Roots and worms can't sort out bad drainage. And I think Martin summarises that pretty well. And you can see some pretty interesting soil conditions there as we look at what Martin's doing. And this is from our farm. We had some little drainage scrapes, some little trial scrapes done for some archaeology. And actually they found these old land drains, some of which, we didn't know about them at all. We knew there were probably some there. And so actually, just even thinking about, maintaining those, making sure that we weren't knackering them up and therefore causing ourselves problems further down the road, that was really helpful. And I know the guys Dick Neal, who at 8 o'clock this morning was already up to his chin in a soil pit, will tell you that actually digging a hole is so important and looking about what's happening under the ground. This is a contribution from Lauren Steinledge. He's across in the States, and actually they talk. They're using a thing called a robot. Not like R-O-B-O-T. I know you know what that is, but a robot, R-O-W-B-O-T, and it's one of their planting robots that they use over there. And actually, what he was talking about was about the kind of differential in soil consolidation. And as the machine had passed down, the consolidation was very different where the robot had been, and his establishment was very different where the robot had been as well. And I don't know about you, but as I've transitioned into Regen Ag, we've often found that our headlands have got better establishment. And that's because we've been terrified of consolidation, but we've actually forgotten about, what's the other one? We've been terrified of compaction, and we've actually thought we've got to make sure we get that little seed to soil contact as well. So you can see that really well demonstrated there. That actually we've got to keep thinking about consolidation and getting things done in the right way. And that's where I thought we were doing a great job, and I thought I'd take 2 Limex fields into the lorries into the field, and everything would be fine. But it turns out I wasn't quite such a regenerative farmer as I thought, and the soil certainly didn't carry them as I thought it perhaps would do. And I couldn't quite get my little saying right, but wheelings aren't just for establishment; they're for life. And I've still got fields now, although we've just spent a lot of money on some wider wheels, which was a bit of a coffee spitter when we did. But actually, investing in that and making sure that we got our wheelings right as we were drilling, as we were establishing, has made a huge difference. So that was something that we definitely learnt. We definitely learnt from our mistakes, and we definitely learnt from being. It's very clear even from the roadside, unfortunately. In the early days. So the second pillar is to protect the soil surface. And if we go back to Lauren, I've got things moved around a different way, that's fine. And actually when I first got into trying to farm in a slightly kinder fashion, we rebranded trash, didn't we? We rebranded it to residue. Because it's organic matter, it's wonderful, it protects the soil. But sometimes when you see a picture here, if we don't get it right, it reverts to being trash again. And actually establishment, and of all the pictures I got sent loads of pictures from people who very generously shared what they'd been up to and the things that the mistakes they'd made and the things they'd learnt. Probably the 2 equal mistakes were drainage and residue. So if you're just coming into regenerative farming, if you're looking to change your system a little bit, if you think about drainage and residue as some farmers that I really look up to have and still have real headaches with, then those will be your kind of 2 key takeaways I think from today. Those of you who are perhaps a bit closer to the front and have had less to drink will be able to see that that the picture in the top in the middle was the field in October. I mean, even the weeds couldn't grow through my very, very poor chaff distribution behind my combine. And that was very evident throughout the year. So we're going to have to think a lot more carefully, particularly with our barley straws, about how we do that and actually how we set the combine up. And here, this is a view from the combine over the road to another one of my fields, unfortunately. And you can see very clearly what the problem is here, with a lot of weeds still persisting behind the combine. Sorry for the grainy photo there, but it was a bit further away. And I've got a little bit of VT from Tom Dewars, which is very helpful because it means I get to speak for about 1 minute less. But if we just run this, he's been trying to establish some linseed, and which is really difficult because it's such a small seed. And actually, when I go over to the States and we hear about these guys drilling on the green, they're drilling in May with some really quite large seeds. And so that kind of copy paste that I've been trying to do and getting wrong, we've got to remember what our context is. It's small seed. Often it's and we've got to make sure that we're applying it to the time of year and the crop that we're growing. So Martin, let's have a little look to see what Tom's going to say.
I'm just going to explain quickly a little bit more about why this linseed perhaps failed. We direct drilled the linseed. We like to direct drill simply because, well, A, it's cheaper. We don't have to spend a lot of time and money on fuel, and we don't disturb the soil, releasing a lot of the carbon in the soil and harming all the things that live in the soil, worms and bacteria and what have you. But if we just, I'll look really closely here. So this weed here with the yellow buds on it, that's actually groundswell. You'll probably see that a lot in your garden. This one here is the antichrist here, some black grass. We don't like black grass. It's really difficult to control now in all crops. It's highly competitive, and if we let that get out of hand, it can cost us an absolute fortune. So Roundup before we drill is the best way of controlling that. But on top here, you can see there's quite a lot of straw still, and this was spring barley last year. And when we direct drilled the linseed into it, the linseed basically gets pushed in amongst this straw, and spring barley straw rots down quite slowly, which makes it really good for animal bedding, but not so good for a little tiny linseed. I'll show you some when we come to drill this, just so you know what linseed is. But it's a small brown seed. You might buy some in packets to put on your breakfast cereal or your yogurt or something, or in cakes, in breads. But what happens is if it gets pushed in amongst the straw and the straw starts to break down, it seems to give off this is a sort of a toxic effect, and that's really affected the germination of the linseed. There are some surviving plants here. There's one here.
So I think we've probably seen enough of that to see that actually, and I've certainly made those mistakes. I've done such a good job of protecting my soil. I've protected it from the following seed that I've been trying to plant as well. So that can definitely happen. But if we're thinking about that, then we have a better chance of remedying that as well. And there's quite a lengthy quote here. If those of you at the front can read it from Richard about the real difficulty of dealing with badly spread chopped straw. Richard's here. I can get him to deliver it. And here's another one from Simon Cowell. I gave up direct drilling second wheats into chopped straw years ago, but I tried it again in 2019, and there was a reminder of why. So again, he's taken his learnings, and it's important sometimes to revisit things that to make sure we can clarify them. But I think it's very clear then that there's a very clear learning there, isn't there? A great picture from Toby. Again, residue management behind the combine when the chopper isn't working. It's amazing. Sometimes we get, if we're rushing things at harvest, the danger is that we're kicking ourselves for the next 12 months or potentially longer. So I had a field last year where I could see the residue from the previous but one harvest. And so I just thought there's something going wrong here. And actually, we work with Soil Fertility Services, other soil consultancies are available, and we had to kind of really try and work out why the soil health wasn't good enough to deal with that residue. But certainly our residue gives us some quite strong signals at times, and this is a great example from Toby. Let's go on to maintain living roots, and some of these things I've not crowbarred in, but I've had to kind of massage into the 5 pillars. And actually, one of the things I've tried to do, I think I've just tried to do too many things. If any of you have got a vegetable garden, you know that the first year you try and grow 20 vegetables and you fail with at least half of them, and by the 5th year you're growing 6 things that you can grow well. And certainly when I was trying to save a lot of my own cover crops. So here you can see the view from the combine. I was growing sunflowers on the left, black oats, and I don't even know what was growing on the other side. But as I was looking back through the photos preparing for this talk, I found the combine blocked, and I don't even know. Oh gosh, here we go. I don't even know where this photo was from. Just found it a bit. It's me in the middle of a combine trying to do something and getting very annoyed, probably using some choice language. So, but I think what I'd done there was trying to do too many different things. And whilst I was trying to maintain living roots, I was trying to grow my own cover crops. I was trying to do everything. But sometimes we've just got to go one step at a time, isn't that right? Another great example from Toby actually about drilling on the green and the allopathic effects of those crops drying off. And I don't know about you guys, I've done a bit of an unplanned experiment this spring with my spring barley, where I've sprayed off our cover crops. I sprayed most of it off at the end of January, probably first week in February. But I ran out of glyphosate probably about 3 hectares before the end of the last field, and I thought, well, I'll leave that and just see if I can spray that off at drilling, like we would do with our autumn sown crops. And actually, I think what happened this year, because I'm starting to see a few years in, I'm starting to see either shading. So I'm not actually managing to kill off all the weeds that are in the crop pre-drilling, or I don't know, maybe I'm not hitting the blackgrass, and we do have quite a blackgrass burden where we are. Maybe I'm not hitting the blackgrass at the right time. Maybe it's not growing and taking in that glyphosate. So I think we'll probably end up, and I know other people have had a similar experience, and I think we'll probably end up going at a reduced rate of glyphosate end of January, beginning of February, and then going again with our kind of peri-drill, our kind of immediately pre or post drill time. And I know Toby, wherever he is doing a great Nuffield on some amazing stuff. So if you want to have a chat with him about that, he's kind of getting his citric acids in and looking at how we can increase the efficacy and reduce the rates of our glyphosate and other inputs. So Toby's at the back there. He would love a pint. And he's also happy to have a conversation. So that's a really interesting thing to be looking at. And another example here, make sure you spray your cover crops off. And again, I think that's just about just really constantly thinking about what we're doing. And constantly learning, and just being on top of things as we go. And I think sometimes it can be very easy to switch off in some of those winter months when actually it feels like nothing's happening, but there is a lot happening. So getting things right at that time before we get into that spring drilling campaign is really, really important. I realise I'm turning my back a little bit to you guys over here. Sorry, I'll come back around a little bit more. Please don't feel ignored. And a great example here from Tom Dewars. And what Tom had done is he'd had a failed headland, done the right thing. He'd put a bit of a mixed cover crop in there, but he left that through, persisted to grow to seed, and he had a slightly difficult establishment time the following year. And those sunflowers that came back through, and whilst they look lovely and pretty, don't they? Sometimes make you feel happy unless they're in your crop. Those have come back through, and I think probably we'll cover one point later on, and that's really about making sure that we keep our eye on the ball. So we're doing the right things. We're putting a little cover crop in where we've had crop failures, but actually we've got to make sure that we're terminating them appropriately and making sure that they're coming back into production in the right way, rather than forcing kind of unintended consequences on us. And really, it comes back down to Stephen Covey, and one of his habits of highly effective people is to make the main thing the main thing. And there's an example on the left there where I was trying to put some cover crops in just for a short time, and I was really trying to deal with my blackgrass. But these different cover crops mixtures came up, and they all look so beautiful. They look great. And we went to go and top them and to deal with them. And we saw some partridge chicks and a hen partridge just ran in there. I thought, well, we'll leave it for a little bit, and it looked so nice. But actually, not that we should have mown the partridges down at all. Let me make that clear. But actually, we left it far too long. We should have gone back and make sure that we dealt with that, because those cover crops were there to deal with blackgrass. They were looking pretty, but actually the value to us and to me in that rotation, the reason we put them in there was to deal with blackgrass, and we should have dealt with that blackgrass and not get distracted and let it persist. So I think there's one of the joys of trying to farm as regeneratively as we can is kind of grappling with things and constantly being challenged and constantly thinking and constantly learning. But we do need to do that. It's very easy to take our eye off the ball and to forget that we need to. The main thing is to keep the main thing as the main thing. And here's an example that again from Lauren, and he just put two slightly different contexts. Of course, it's across in the States, but we've got to think about what learnings we can take from there. And he'd effectively, if I slightly interpret it, the traffic cone on the left went into a maize crop with a companion, effectively, where the soil was better protected. On the right, just went into a straight maize, and you can see the soil splash. And now they've got quite a bit of aggressive rainfall over there. They're growing big, tall crops of maize with lots of gaps in between, but that will be happening on a micro level in our crops. and in some cases it might be happening on a macro level in our crops. So it's really, I think that's a great learning point. In fact, if I could put that little slide up to think about ground cover, think about rain splash, and think about some of those things that we almost don't even think about there. That's on such a small level. So let's move on to diversity. Andrew sent me a great photo. Thank you for this, Andrew. I really appreciate it. I'm going to read it out because he words it much better than I could. There's a beautiful big summer cover crop on a fallow field. I patted myself on the back for a job well done. Has anyone done that? I patted myself on the back for a job well done. Unfortunately, lurking in the base was a huge population of blackgrass, and it set seed, causing a major headache the following year. And again, that's a great little segue from the 2 points, because that absolutely that can happen. And sometimes it's really important that we get right down in amongst things and see what's going on in there. This is one of my examples about companions. I do apologise. It's sometimes a bit difficult for you guys at the back, particularly if you're out in the light, to see some of this. But what you've got there is a crop of wheat. And on the right-hand side of it, it's quite clear when you're close to the screen that there's a population of blackgrass almost to the line, and that was where our companion crop ran out on the rapeseed that we drilled the previous year. And I'm still learning with this one. We put a companion crop in we've got a great Sky Easy drill. Put it in with one pass. We put a companion crop of buckwheat, berseem clover, and fenugreek. And I got a phone call to say it's running a little bit low. I said, well, let's leave it as a control strip. And this was the result of my control strip. This really, I guess, is the competition which crowded out the blackgrass. And maybe I don't know. Maybe there was an element of as it covered the ground, there was greater predation. I'm not really entirely sure, but you can certainly see the impact there of getting more diversity, because the rest of it's all pretty clean. And I also just want to say a bit of a word on BYDV, and I've had a few conversations about this in the last couple of days, actually, down in Hampshire. And sometimes when we make the decision for, we make decisions for a whole wide range of reasons. It could be an economic reason, it could be a personal decision, it could be down to our maybe our accreditation or any other reason. Actually, we've then got to sit with the results of that as well. So on our farm, we've chosen not to use insecticides for the last few years. I'm really sure that when in the past we've tried to spray orange blossom midge in June, and then we've hoped that our predators can predate our cabbage stem flea beetle only a couple of months later, that we're actually setting our kind of natural predators up for a fall. But we've decided not to use insecticide, and we've had to live with an element of BYDV. And I think there's definitely something to be said as you go along your regenerative journey, that you make some decisions for various different reasons, and there are some consequences that either that we understand and that we sometimes just have to live with. So we've just got to work out what level we're happy with. And for me, I know I've got some BYDV in some of my fields, but I'm happy with that. That's okay. It's an acceptable level. So I just wanted to have a note on that. And I know I'm not alone. A farmer that I look up to in a huge way, Simon Cowell, who I think was the very first soil farmer of the year, had exactly the same thing. I chose the wrong time to go insecticide free. I had a warm easterly wind, and we had a lot of problems with BYDV. And I want to talk about livestock integration. This is the kind of key thing that makes us regenerative farmers and not conservation agriculturalists, although it's all just label, isn't it? And actually, when I think back to several years ago, when I now look back, I now realise we started to go down a regenerative route. We didn't think, let's be regenerative farmers. We didn't really know what it was. But actually, we looked at all these 5 pillars and thought they all stack up individually. It makes sense for us to reduce our tillage because of our fuel, because of our soils. It makes sense to us to protect our soil, think about soil armour and perhaps increase our organic matter. It makes sense for us for all these areas as well. But livestock integration is something which I think a lot of us grapple with. And you saw from that very first video where I had this clay. I'd picked that off the surface of the soil, and that clay was so tightly compacted. And I'd let some 60 kilogram ewes graze on it for far too long, when I should have brought in. I would have been far better to bring in some lambs at kind of 40 kilos and graze them in for a much shorter period. But I was just learning as we went along, and certainly I've been doing that. And this is something we did this year. And I'm sorry, there's going to be a bit of squinting for you guys at the back there. But in essence, I've got a footpath going right down the middle of the screen on the field you can see on the far side of the valley from where I'm taking the photo. And on the left, we grazed it off. And on the right, we didn't, because there was a footpath. It was a bit too much of a funny area. We really should have moved the grazing across there as well. But I was away on holiday, ridiculous, But what we can see is a couple of things. First of all, we can see where the water's held up by the tram line. So the water's passing down that valley side, and you can see really clearly that it's held up above those tram lines. So I know that's a clear indicator. I've got to do something about that this year. But also you can see the difference between the left and the right, and this is where perhaps you might want to have a little revisit of this talk. It will be available online afterwards, because you'll be able to see the difference a lot. You'll be able to look a lot closer at the difference between the left and the right-hand side there, where we look at the area that had been grazed and not grazed. This is just proof that there were some sheep there, but you don't need to see that. There they are. Oh, wonderful. I had to get a very short video so there weren't any limping in it. But I should have put a limping sheep in there, shouldn't I? Because that would be learning from my mistakes. And that's the same. That's exactly those photos. I've tried not to. The light was the same. The photography is the same. So you can see the difference between the grazed on the left and the ungrazed on the right. There's definitely more volunteers. There's more disease. There's a different profile as well. Why have I gone 5 slides on? And so that's been a real learning for me as well this year. I will share this presentation afterwards. So if you want to take a closer look, you can see. But it was very clear to me that actually I should have just got on and carried on with it and done the hard work and moved the electric fence a little bit further the other side of the line there. I was kidding myself that I was using it as a control strip, but I already knew it was going to work, and I should have just backed myself and carried on. Let me just say one thing that I have to say. At the beginning of this talk, I told a little lie. How do you feel about that groundswell? Actually, pretty generous. I think that's pretty kind. I told you there are 6 pillars, according to Rick Clark. It's not actually true. Rick will tell you there are 7 pillars of regenerative farming, and the 7th pillar is focus. And I thought, gosh, if I thought context, I had to get my head around context, whether that was even worthy of being a pillar. I thought the same thing with focus, probably to an even greater extent. I had a great chat with Toby and a few other farmers. I thought, God, are we just trying to make a name of ourselves, bringing more regenerative agriculture pillars in? But actually, the more we thought about it, the more we realised that focus is so important. And it goes back to what I was saying earlier. There are so many things to grapple with, and you walk around the site today. And you could be the best identifying moths, and yet you might have no idea about mycorrhizal fungal associations. You might be fantastic at turning your composts, but frankly, you're pretty dire in another area. There are so many things that we can learn in this fantastic ecosystem that we get to manage. But actually, what's really important is that we're really focusing as we're going through, as we're making our decisions. So yes, we've got to do all those other things, but actually, focus is so important. So I just want to show some. I mean, this is, and I always think in a good presentation you should quote from The Art of War. So this is Know Your Enemy and blackgrass. We had a terrible year on our farm about 10 or so years ago, and really since then, nearly every decision we've made has been referencing that enemy, and that's been our focus actually. And I would say we are slowly inching forward with that. But the reason we got into a bad place is because it didn't quite. We hadn't thought of it. We hadn't kind of realised quite how much of an enemy it was. We hadn't given it as much of our focus that it deserved. And we've done that in the last 10 years, and things haven't been great, but they're getting better. And actually, there's a real difference between when we applied focus and when we didn't apply focus. So that's where I think focus is. It is so important, particularly in regenerative farming. And actually, to know your enemy. I don't know. That's not really appropriate to blackgrass, but you certainly got to really understand your enemy, and that's why. And I don't like to use the word enemy. It's we're kind of working in this ecosystem, but that's why it's so great here, because we've got so many things which are impacting on our farm, on our yields, on our environment. And actually, what we get to do here is we get to go around and learn about those things, the good things and the bad things, and to be able to cope with them even better. And a couple more examples. This is from Ben Taylor Davies. Many of you will know Ben. And again, this was a focus thing. He said, "I just decided to dispense with fertilizer, and you can see which quarter of the field I decided to do with. That was probably an unfocused decision. It was like, just let's give that a go, but it didn't perhaps have his focus. And almost one of the last quotes, actually, Richard, is yours, which is be patient. And I think that's such an important part of focus as well. When we're trying to rush and get things done, and we feel under a lot of pressure, actually part of our being focused is involves being patient as well. My grandmother always used to say, patience is a virtue, possess it if you can, seldom in a woman, never in a man. But I think, but I think it's so important that actually that we get the gift of patience as we're making our decisions in our regenerative farming. Just pressed it 3 times. Let's try another one. So let's look at some gatherings, and I will just run through these, and please feel free to, if you want to take a picture at the end, but this is just what we've looked at today. Copy and paste doesn't work. You've got to think about your context. Drainage, drainage, drainage. Wheelings, invest in soil, invest in tyres. Think regularly about both. You'll kick yourself all year if you don't get your combine settings right. Think about that trashy residue, and don't stretch yourself too thin. Don't work the soil too hard. We were talking about assimilating heavy residues when the soil's trying to support new growth, and the allopathic effects of it getting, everything happening at the same time. It's a big ask. Terminate your cover crops, or at least make a conscious decision. I think we've got to make conscious decisions and not let decisions almost be made for us due to our own kind of inactivity. Keep the main thing the main thing. Look what's lurking in the bottom of that cover crop. Thank you, Andrew. That was such a great example, and I know I've got many examples, and others will. Think about soil splash. Use companions wisely. Make peace with your decision making, and we spoke about BYTV. Get your grazing right, and don't forget to think during winter, or you like going skiing and shooting. The 7th pillar is focus. Oh, that's a... And so what I would, if you wanted to take a quick snap of that, please do. But again, I refer back to that kind of 6th pillar of context. So this is what I've learnt through our journey on our farm. It might be helpful for you guys. You might think, gosh, I've learnt that already. You might think, I know 90% of that, but there's a couple of things I need to think about. You might think, that's a load of baloney. I'm going to have a chat with him in the bar later on. That's absolutely fine. But these are my learnings as I've gone through for these last kind of 6 or 7 years as we've gone through. But I'm always really interested, and I feel like this is I'd love to repeat this because I think we're so valuable when we share what we've got wrong, because that's when we really make mistakes. Experience comes just after you need it. And there's a little bit of a warning for the next slide. Some of you caught it. This is make sure that when you're stepping into a yard of pigs with 25 kilos of grain, that you make sure that you're very, very careful. And this was something that which set me back a little bit a few years ago. So I would always say, take care of yourselves. And I want to leave with just a final quotes from Russ and back to you, Andrew. So thank you for putting this in. Russ said, "I would say most of my mistakes have been ones of mindset and perspective. For example, worrying about the wrong stuff or not asking for some help." What a great lesson. Wish we all had that virtue tattooed. And Andrew says, "I always think you learn the most from your mistakes because generally they stick in the mind and you won't repeat them." It's great to learn from other people's mistakes. We will go out in the next 12 months and make our own mistakes. Experience does happen just after after you need it. But what I will do is just leave you with a thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for engaging. Thank you for talking to your wise neighbour or being a wise neighbour. And thank you for just being so open in this industry. Farming is the 4th industry I've worked in. And it's the most open, the most welcoming. We share more than the other industries I've worked in. And I have to say, even though I was born and brought up on a family farm, I suspected that, I didn't think that would be the case. And I was really wowed when I came back into farming some years ago, actually how warm the embrace is. I think a generation ago our competitors were our neighbours, but now our competitors are a long way away, and we stand to gain so much from working together, from sharing things, including our mistakes, and working together. So thank you very much. I would love to continue conversations, and please do, if you've got some wise neighbours, grab hold of them, buy them a drink, and just find as much information out of them as they're worth. But thank you very much, and have a great evening.